What up, YouTube? Lord of Houston coming at you with a video. 713 Space City, we in the building. Alright, so something I gotta catch up on the day 2 free agency of the Houston Texans. And I gotta say, they was pretty busy. As far as, first move in day 2 was re-signing Kaimi Fairbairn, who was efficient, by the way, who only missed 4 field goals, to be exact. Perfect on extra points, but only to miss 4 field goals. Definitely well earned, because of how efficient he was. Has been with the team through the ups and the downs, the ugliest of downs. Good kicker, that deserves to be around the Texans a while longer. I'm happy for him. 2 years for 13 mil. Can't be too mad at that. It's gonna be our kicker for at least like 2 more years, if I'm not mistaken. So got him locked up. The second move they made was a big one, the big one, like the elephant in the room. Like Braden Smith from the Colts, if I'm not mistaken. Braden Smith, if I'm not mistaken, who could play a little left guard, but I could see him, playing right guard. And the move, by the way, was a good one, by the way, because like I've been mentioning, the Texans need help on the offensive line bad. And as good as this adding him to the O-line is, they still would need to add another left guard and or center, because Houston really desperately needs bullies on that interior O-line, because, ain't no telling what ferocious the opposing D-line the Texans could run into in 2026. It's already enough that you got to play Jeffrey Simmons twice a year, with the Titans revamping their roster. And I know in Jacksonville losing players left and right, and the Colts, they did resign Alec Pierce, but lost Michael Pittman to the Steelers. So, but I'm just keeping it locked in on the Texans though. So the Braden Smith move, I could get behind that, hands down. I can truly get behind that. So can't wait to see how he looks, once the season gets started. But of course, you got to go through training camp, to be exact, to see how the players coming along. Training camp and all that, which normally starts in July. That's before preseason goes. That's before the preseason even goes. To be exact. Hold on, let me. Braden Smith, yeah, I got it right. Braden Smith. Yes, sir. And like I mentioned, if they can, add a left guard or a center, that'll be great. Hell, even if it's only a depth move, because the offensive line definitely needs depth for sure. Like every position, not just the online, but every position as well. To be exact. Now, another move they made is, trading for a punter from the Saints. I forgot his name, but the trading for the punter, which and of course swapping late round picks, I gotta say that Saints punter is pretty good, which meant that Tommy Townsend wasn't gonna be with the Texans in 2026, who's now sound elsewhere, and I wish him the best, wherever team he's with now. And what other move they made? Let me see what other. And of course they added a young D-line, Kyle Long, whatever. Well, hold on, let me see what his name is. Let me find out. Logan Hall, DT Logan Hall from the Buccaneers for 2 years, and before I explain that, and the punter that they traded for, the Texans traded for was Kyle Kroger, you know. So yeah, that's him. But Logan Hall, young D tackle, and young defensive end, you know, only 25, 26 years old, young, definitely younger than Danica Autry for sure. And yeah, I mean, it's true that they lost Tim Settle, unfortunately, but they did manage to resign Sheldon Rankins, for about 2 more years, which, like I mentioned before, it could have done that in the 2024 offseason. But what do I think about the Logan Hall move? He's young, capable of, I'll say fill in. My guess is, a rotational player. And he's also younger than Derek Barnett, a player who I wouldn't mind keeping as well, but it depends on, how they feel about bringing Derek Barnett back. But I feel like he's capable of, stepping up in that defensive line as well, especially under DeMeco Ryans' defense, who's capable of getting players' minds right, getting defensive players in the right mind, and yeah, I mean, yeah, I could still see this D line still being ferocious. Don't get me wrong. Kurt, of course, you got Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter leading the charge, but Logan Hall, I feel like he can be like effective in a let's say pass rush, run stopping, sure, there's strengths and weaknesses he could work on, some key cons he can work on that'll make him better than he already is, to be exact. And he did happen to play ball at the University of Houston, to be exact. And not to mention, he ended his tenure with 10 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 101 tackles in his 4 years with Tampa Bay. So, yeah, it's safe to say, he's still young, pretty much learning, to be exact. And it's back in Houston where he played college ball at the University of Houston. And I gotta say, it's a pretty crucial depth move to the Houston Texans defensive line, to be exact. So hopefully he can make the roster, because you gotta, like I said, you gotta go through training camp, you gotta go through preseason, where players battle for roster spots in the 53-man roster, to see who survives and who doesn't make the cut. So yeah, Houston signed Logan Hall. Houston traded for Kai Kroger. Houston signed Braden Smith and extended Kaimi Fairbairn. So anything I left out for sure, and will be discussed in another video as well. But until then, Lord of Houston checking on up out of here. 713 Space City. I'm out.